We have major breaking news affecting the American domestic gun industry, which of course is very important that they stay healthy because that's how most of us get our firearms, from the American gun industry. Well, we have another example of anti-gun efforts by the Joe Biden administration to attack the Second Amendment in all respects, specifically a leaked document that the Reload and Stephen Gutowski over there at the Reload has uncovered, has just reported that the Biden administration has a new internal draft associated with the U.S. Department of Commerce and impacting and trying to cut back on the number of American exports of firearms, specifically semi-automatic weapons, to foreign countries, which of course is presumably profitable for the American gun industry, which we need to have robust and great for our Second Amendment needs. Let's break down this leaked document that Stephen Gutowski has reported on in one moment. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Box Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and a nominee in two separate categories for the 2024 Gundy Awards, top male influencer in the Second Amendment space, as well as one of the top voices of the Second Amendment. I am proud of both nominations. All right, folks, well, got to give kudos to Stephen Gutowski and the Reload. If you don't subscribe to the Reload, you may want to take a look at that. Great source. Great journalist, Stephen Gutowski. He is reporting, and I'll put a link to this story down below, that there is now a leaked document. Apparently it's legit. There's no debate. This is real. A leaked draft document by the United States Department of Commerce, the Commerce Department, i.e. do business, that would effectively make it much more difficult for the American arms industry, the gun industry, to be able to sell their firearms overseas to foreign civilians, even though those regulations today are already heavily, there's a heavy amount of regulations already on these. So now they're trying to make it even harder for the American gun industry to make money by selling semi-automatic firearms, such as whether it be shotguns, rifles, or handguns, all semi-automatic related firearms overseas, as well as presumably scopes and other things like that. It turns out, according to this leaked document, which again is not final, the Department of Commerce has indicated this is not a final document, but specifically, as you know, the United States Commerce regulates the exports of all civilian firearms, including some parts and accessories such as scopes. And this new draft, which Stephen Gutowski has reported on in the Reload, would increase the number of regulations and restrictions on the export of these semi-automatic rifles, pistols, and shotguns. This, of course, would not impact machine guns, fully automatic weapons, because those are subject to State Department rules under ITAR. This is really only dealing with the sale to civilians in foreign markets. Now, of course, this is going to do nothing for public safety, because just to give you an illustration of one of the things they're planning on doing, is they're cutting back the amount of time that a export permit that an American gun company has to procure from the Department of Commerce, an export permit to export firearms overseas. They're cutting down on the length that those export permits would be valid for from the current 4 years. In other words, if you get an export permit today, it's valid for 4 years. You don't have to reapply for 4 years. But under this proposed rule, they're talking about cutting it down to 1 year, obviously to impose additional legal fees and administrative headaches on American gun industries that then will have to apply every year for the same permit. As to what this does for anyone is beyond my understanding. Obviously, this is nothing more than harassing the American gun industry, trying to make it more costly on them to either discourage the sale of firearms overseas or to make it less profitable to be in that gun business, which, of course, we in America want a very successful gun industry, not only because we need it for a Second Amendment, but our military also needs a robust American gun industry to protect our country from those kinds of attacks as well. So you really do want an American military that's strong, an American civilian domestic gun industry, which is strong. The other thing, of course, that's going on is specifically, apparently, according to this draft regulation, is that they want to make it more difficult to export semi-automatic firearms. And one of the ways they also are going to do it is they're going to create a new classification, according to this draft, in order to make it easier for the Department of Commerce to flag potential deals where American gun companies need to get these export permits, and then sell these guns specifically to overseas civilians. So there's all these additional requirements they intend to impose upon the American gun industry, such as requiring getting passports from who these guns are going to, and so on and so on. Now, this is all under the guise, of course, as you know, of protecting people from the dangers of terrorists getting access to these firearms. But these firearms are already heavily regulated. There always has to be extreme detail and paperwork associated with where these guns are going, who's buying them, who is the end user, and so on. So these regulations all exist. So again, this has nothing to do with protecting anyone in the world. It has everything to do with targeting the American gun companies. Now, I want to make an observation that one of our best exports, one of our most successful exports historically and even today, is firearms, weapon systems. How many times do you open up the newspaper and you read about like India or some other country wants to acquire military weaponry from the United States? They want it, whether it be for their military or they want to acquire small arms and so on and so on. So one of our great exports in the way that Americans not just make money in the gun industry, but the people that work in the gun industry. Keep in mind that the gun industry has employees where people are working at high-tech, important jobs with sophisticated machinery and the like to do this sort of thing. And again, one of the other beneficiaries, of course, the American gun industry is not just Americans who want to exercise their Second Amendment rights, but it's also, the police officers, the military, and so on that get the benefit of all the ongoing improvements in the domestic gun industry, the ammunition industry, the scope industry. All this stuff builds upon. We want a robust industry. And again, if the Department of Commerce, and it's ironic that the name of this department is Commerce, right? You would think that the Department of Commerce would actually want there to be commerce, but in this case, it's really the Department of Anti-Commerce if some of these regulations were to go into effect. We'll see if that actually occurs because they're discouraging American commerce from selling these weapons to overseas foreign buyers in the civilian markets overseas. But, other countries need guns too. People overseas need guns too and weapons to protect their lives. You are your own first responder is not just true here in the United States. As we saw this week, unfortunately, it's also the case in places like the Czech Republic, where you had mass shootings in the heavily gun-controlled Czech Republic, which is far more gun control oriented than the United States is, for example. Nevertheless, again, it turns out that the police in the Czech Republic were not able to prevent, unfortunately, that mass shooting, which is not a shock because whether you're police in the United States, the IDF in Israel, or police in the Czech Republic or wherever, the reality is most people are their own first responder all the time because when seconds count, the police are minutes away. Or in the case of Israel, perhaps you could argue that when seconds count, the IDF is hours away, as some people have said. Nevertheless, the point is that here we have a successful American gun industry with thousands upon thousands of people working in it with their jobs and their livelihood on the line, and you have potentially the Department of Commerce actually arguably trying to engage in anti-commerce. This is what happens when you take an administration like the Joe Biden administration that has, in my view, really an anti-American agenda in all respects, and you put these people into positions of power and influence and they will do what they need to do to make it harder for Americans to be America and for Americans to earn a living and to be successful and for American companies to grow and succeed, which allows all of us in the country to be safer and wealthier, which is what we want. You would think that our government would be about protecting Americans and helping American business and American commerce, but apparently this administration has no interest in this when it is inconsistent with their agenda and cultural revolution that they seem to be wanting to foist upon us. Nevertheless, we don't need to get into all that right here and right now, beyond simply saying that this is another attack on the Second Amendment indirectly by, again, the gun industry, because the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It does no good to have the right to keep and bear arms if you cannot acquire firearms in the first instance. And the way most people acquire firearms, of course, is through buying them from FFLs and gun companies here domestically. It's just shocking that the Department of Commerce or anybody in the Biden administration would prefer for American gun companies to look for a reason to, build factories overseas to sell into the foreign market. Why would anybody want that as opposed to create the jobs and the wealth and prosperity here in the United States and then sell them through exports, especially when the munitions and the gun industry is one of our best and most successful exports in the country? Why would we want to get rid of that? I don't understand. Beyond that, I should just give you a quote here according to the Reload from Larry Keane, the general counsel for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. This is what he said when he found out about this. Quote, We think this is part of the Biden administration's whole of government attack against the industry. They're trying to find any way possible to harm the industry. I think that is pretty clear. That's exactly what is going on. That anything that Joe Biden can do with a pen and a phone to harm the gun industry, gun owners, the Second Amendment, they are willing to go to great lengths to accomplish that with a pen and a phone, because they certainly can't get it through Congress. All right, folks, there you have it. Hope you liked this video. Make sure you subscribe. Some people said they've been unsubscribed to this channel, so make sure you subscribe just to make sure that did not happen to you. And feel free to like this video and share it with your friends. Don't forget to follow me on X at 4Boxes Diner, where I get to even more Second Amendment information throughout the day than I can in videos. And we'll see you again soon here at the 4Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.